Hello, hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Therapy Reveal. I am Blue, your host for today's episode. And in today's episode, we have here with us another guest speaker. Her name is Diana Vo, and she is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome onto the show.
Hi, Blue. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you onto the show.
I am very excited to be here. A little nervous.
Yeah, a little nervous. No worries, no worries. Don't worry. This
Oh,
is a judgment-free zone. Don't worry.
oh, I know. I've heard your past interviews. You've been very skilled with being very judgment free.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So, to start off, can you share a little bit about your journey to becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist?
Ooh, I feel like this is something that um, I should already have down, right? But so to start, I was actually, let me see. I went through the journey of, oh, I want to be a teacher, a lawyer, a this, a that, this. And it wasn't until I think I was about 9 or 10. I was watching Harriet the Spy, if anybody's ever seen it. Um, but there's a scene where this little girl is in a child psychology office, and the psychologist opens this floor to ceiling closet, and it's just nothing but toys. And even though I didn't know what he was doing for a living, I just saw that thinking, oh my gosh, as an adult, you can play games, get paid for it. Yes, I want to do that. And I just kind of grew up naturally being the person that people would turn to and not necessarily ask for advice, but to share things. And not that I had all the life experience, but I felt like I was able to create that kind of environment where people felt it was safe to come to me and kind of share and not be judged. Um, and so, fast forward, I kind of stayed focused on becoming some kind of therapist or something in the psychology field. And so, my undergrad was initially psychology. I went to UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, for psychology, and then ended up switching halfway through, so the end of my sophomore year, and I doubled in Asian American studies and women's studies with a minor in applied psychology because I realized I wanted to do more in-person work instead of research. And that was something that I didn't know could be, I didn't know those were options that you had to kind of divide it. I just thought psychology was psychology. But after that, I went on to grad school, got to study abroad in India and in Mexico, and then did a number of internships after I had finished grad school and gotten my associate number, which at the time was called an intern number, and eventually got licensed and worked at a number of places, and here I am.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
How did you end up specializing in like trauma therapy, life transitions, and ADHD in what you're currently doing now as a
So, let me see. So, in working in the psych hospital and working in community mental health and also working in addiction, there's trauma everywhere, you know, and oftentimes it's invisible. Things that are, let me see here. I've been told by people before me that trauma is not necessarily the thing that happens to you, but it's how you respond to things, right? And oftentimes things can be a traumatic event, such as like a car accident, right? Or if you had witnessed something and it's your response to it, because some people can go through an event and have no reaction to it, just like, okay, shake it off. It's, another day. And other people can go through the exact same thing and feel like it just stays in their system forever, you know? And for some people, it's having a witness, having someone who is there to validate your experience, is sometimes really not all that you need, but for some people, it is something that they need to be able to let go of a trauma and be able to heal. So that was a common thread in all of the work that I've done. And as for life transitions and ADHD, I've noticed a common theme with a number of my clients where those are the ones that seem to progress the most quickly with me. So I think that's just kind of becoming like a niche for me. And then also for ADHD, one of the ADHD superpowers is just kind of deep diving into a topic that you find interesting. And so, as such, I found that women are oftentimes diagnosed later with ADHD than men. And so, there's a lot of grief involved in that. There's a lot of, I could go on for a very long time, but ultimately, these are just areas that have become of sincere interest to me. So, that's how I ended up specializing in these things.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. And you also mentioned, as you were in a little bit of when you sent your information to us, you also mentioned how you use various techniques, including mindfulness, EMDR, and somatic experiencing while you're working with your clients. How do these approaches contribute to helping your clients establish a sense of safety within their bodies?
Well, let me explain very briefly. So, with EMDR, it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So, say with EMDR, we think of this as the brain, and every time we have an experience, we file it away, right? So, every time I eat something sweet, purple, round, it's probably a grape, a berry, a plum, so I associate it with that. Every time I walk into a certain room, I associate with this kind of memory network, right? Every time I experience a particular thing, I kind of file it away, right? And so with trauma, say, I'm just going to go back to the car, when I'm in the car, my neural network says I should be safe, right? And so when I get to an accident, I now have this new memory where it's like, wait, I'm in a car. It should be safe, but it's not. So I'm not sure where to file it, right? And so it just kind of sits in my brain. And then usually when I'm sleeping, that's kind of when things reprocess. And it's like, well, does it go here? Does it go here? This is kind of when it makes sense of everything. For people that are a little bit millennials and older, defragging your computer, it's kind of like that. With somatic experiencing, though, the saying is that the issues are in the tissues. And so, or the body remembers, right? So sometimes there are things that happen that your body reacts involuntarily without you even knowing it. So think of like when you have an intuition, you walk into a room, something feels off. You haven't processed it yet, but your body kind of gives you that signal, right? Or right before this interview, I had this sensation of like my body was saying, I need to go for a walk. And so I was able to ask you, shortly before this interview, like, hey, in paying attention to my body. And this is also part mindfulness too, but in paying attention to my body and really listening to what it's asking me, I can respond to it. And so with mindfulness, it's kind of being able to pay attention to what's happening internally and externally without judgment. And so, I'm sure I could go on for a very long time with these.
Oh, no worries. But thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. Why do you believe emotional self-awareness is crucial for individuals, and how does that play a role in fostering self-love and self-compassion?
Emotional self-awareness. So back to mindfulness, right? Oftentimes, I think especially after working in addiction, I've noticed that there's so much self-medicating that we do through food, through sex, drugs, alcohol, internet, the consumption of things to kind of keep our brains busy, keep our minds busy. But I think people forget to feel things. And so when you have an experience, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this, right? Or that we're so busy trying to make something grammable that we forget to experience it. It's almost like we're missing this key part of being human, right? And this part of this human experience is feeling things in that moment. And so the discomfort that I've noticed, when you can't name what you're feeling, it gets very uncomfortable. And people become uncomfortable, what I've noticed is that people look out to medicate in some way, right? So, and when I say medicate, it's not always drugs or anything, but it's finding a way to stay busy, right? And so emotional self-awareness is just getting into that practice of checking in of, what do I need right now? You know, so when I'm procrastinating, right? I tell my clients that procrastination is anxiety management. And growing up, either things were really easy for me or really challenging, right? And so I will procrastinate on something that's very challenging for me because it's related to my self-esteem. Where if I don't do it perfectly, I just won't do it because I'm afraid that people will judge me for it. And so in procrastinating on a particular project, it's old me would have just, doom scrolled or, which I still do on occasion, or just, browsing online shopping or something, or just going out and avoiding or cleaning my room even, right? I mean, case in point, every exam, I always had a clean room because I would rather clean my room than study for my tests. And so, yeah, in practicing just taking a moment, taking a breath, and just kind of checking in, like, what am I feeling right now? And what does my body need right now? And sometimes just taking just a minute or two to pause and breathe and check in. Maybe I'm hungry, maybe I'm angry, lonely, or tired, right? But I can take care of those needs rather than self-medicate and procrastinate and, whatever it is. So that emotional self-awareness, it really is a practice to kind of check in with who we are, but also in practicing that, I feel that it allows us to experience things more deeply, so when, say, like right now, in being with you here in this interview room, I'm not thinking about, the things that my pets are doing, the things that are happening outside in the world, or, the people I need to see later, or any of my notes or anything like that. Like, it robs me of the experience of being here with you, and like, in this time, after this is over, I don't get to have this experience with you anymore because that moment has passed. Right? And so getting to enjoy this precious moment of just us being here and, the things that have had to happen for us to be here at the same place and the same time is such a joy. And in practicing that emotional self-awareness and in feeling things more deeply, I get to experience things like joy much more deeply.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I do realize that I know that, like, practicing emotional self-awareness, it's easier said than done because that's something that you have to develop over time and it takes practice. Yeah. And I agree with that. So thank you for sharing. You mentioned earlier that mindfulness is one of the techniques that you utilize. How can individuals incorporate mindfulness into their daily lives to enhance emotional self-awareness? What are some tips that you would give for our viewers?
So for mindfulness, one of my favorite things to do is to use the things around me. And this is a technique I've learned from the Buddhist Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. But finding outside cues, such as like your cell phone chime or a red light, right? So for me, when I sit at a red light, that red light is a reminder to stop and breathe, and say when my cell phone rings, right, or I get a text or a notification, the phone is there for my convenience, but in that moment, I get to just pause and take a breath. There's no judgment there. It's just like, yeah. But also, it's that awareness. So for me, it's someone out in the universe has reached out to me, whether it's a friend, family member, telemarketer, who cares? But somebody's reaching out to me in this moment. And if I just lunge for the phone and grab it, right, there's this anticipation, almost anxiety, almost fear, right? And so when I do pick up, what kind of energy am I putting into this? But when I pause, I get to check myself. Do I have the emotional capacity to make myself available for whoever's on the phone? Right? Because sometimes it is, friends or family or, you know, um, someone who's in distress, right? And so it's taking that moment to pause and pay attention to my capacity allows me the practice of self-compassion and not judging myself, because I used to want to be there for everybody. It's like, oh, people are counting on me to do these things. And it's like, that's so much pressure, And the fact of the matter is, like, I can't always be there for everybody. And in recognizing that, cutting myself some slack, that's some emotional self-compassion, right? But that emotional awareness has allowed me to be more compassionate towards myself and others, right? Because I don't get offended when people don't pick up my phone calls. Why do I think other people get offended when I don't pick up? And so but back to mindfulness techniques. So there's finding that outside cue. Also, when you're noticing yourself feeling a little activated, a little anxious or overwhelmed, I like to pick a color and then just name everything around me that's that color. So right now in this space, if I were to pick the color blue, you're blue. The walls of this room are blue. There's a candle over there that's blue. My sweater is a shade of blue. It's kind of green, but it's, I'll still count it. Behind me, the tapestry, there's some blue sky. And there's various shades of blue in the books. And so that technique allows me to just focus on what's in front of me and kind of just detach from whatever worries are happening outside.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that technique. I should use that in everyday life too.
Try it. It's quite joyful because now you're searching for very lovely things outside of you.
And there's something about that, and like mindfulness that you talk about. It kind of gives this sense that we should live like with the mindset of a childlike, free spirit sort of thing. I mean, that's how I see it.
Oh, absolutely. I think children are such beautiful models of mindfulness, because it seems like everything to them is just curious, right? Children will come into an experience of curiosity, right? So when there's that lack of judgment, there's no expectations. And so if there's no expectation, there's no like premeditated like judgment or resentment or anything like that. It's just, oh, I wonder what this is. And then if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. And if it's okay, it's okay. And like, how lovely is that?
Yeah, I love that. They're awesome role models. Yeah.
Learn so much from children.
I know. And I agree with that, honestly. You could learn a lot from children.